Funding for Bea Ojakangas Welcome to My Kitchen is provided by the citizens of Minnesota through the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
We'll be making a moist, flaky recipe for filled Danish pastry that is anything but traditional, and remembering a day on the set cooking with Julia. Today on Welcome to My Kitchen. I'm Bea Ojakangas, cookbook author, food writer, columnist, wife, mother, and grandmother. I've spent my life learning about food and sharing my knowledge with others. It's given me a certain perspective on cooking, rooted in the flavors, traditions, and rhythms of life in northern Minnesota, and a passion for sharing what I know. Welcome to my kitchen.
My mother-in-law, Dick's mother, was visiting, and she had answered the phone. And he said, "Hello, this is Julia Child, is Beatrice there?" and she got so excited. When I came home, she ran to the door. She said, "Julia Child called. She called and asked for you, and she sounded just like she does on TV." I got the biggest bang out of that. And so she called and she asked if I would like to come on her show and show her some wonderful Scandinavian baking. I said, would I? Oh man, would I? Of course I would. So it was all set up, and I flew out to Cambridge in Boston, or next to Boston, and that's where her house was, and did some baking with her out of the Scandinavian baking book. She was so fun. If you've seen any of her shows, she's there poking her finger into the bowl and acting like as if she's never cooked a thing in her life, which is not true. On the way out there, I thought, oh my gosh, what can I tell Julia about anything? Because she, as far as I was concerned, she knew everything. Welcome. This is the recipe that I did with Julia Child. And that's why I think it's kind of fun to share the whole recipe with you. This is one of the recipes, actually. It's the quick Danish pastry. And I had to explain that Danish pastry is normally made with another kind of method. But this one is quick, and I learned it in Denmark. Actually, this is what they're doing all over, in Denmark and in Europe, because it's so much quicker. So we start out by dissolving a package of yeast in a quarter of a cup of warm water. And we'll let that heat up, warm up, and we're going to add a half a cup of milk that's at room temperature, and we're going to add 1 egg, room temperature, and a quarter of a cup of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. And that's a very, very, very simple liquid. Now the thing about the liquid for Danish pastry is that there's yeast in it. Otherwise, it's very similar to the way that you might make just a puff pastry or pastry for pie. So here we go. We'll set this aside, and it will just foam up a little bit. It takes a few minutes. It'll foam up. And in the meantime, I'm going to cut 2 sticks of unsalted butter into pieces. And they will go into the food processor with 2.5 cups of flour, all-purpose flour. This looks like a lot of butter, but that's the way pastry is. Danish pastry is very rich, and we're doing this would normally be, the butter would normally be rolled out in one big flat hunk, and then you fold and roll it into the yeast dough. Okay, but I'm going to use the food processor. So we're putting the 2 cups
and a half cup of flour into the food processor, and then just we'll drop the unsalted butter in. And I'm using unsalted butter here because the unsalted butter does give us a slightly different texture, and it makes it really good. We'll pulse it about 8 or 10 times. Until the butter pieces are about no bigger than ½ an inch. We have our yeast mixture, which is the liquid that will go into the pastry, and we're just going to dump all of the flour and butter into the bowl. Then we'll take a spatula and just turn the mixture over on itself, and you just keep doing this until there's no more flour visible in the mixture. But you don't want to mix it really, really hard, or you'll end up making cookie dough, and we don't want to do that. And as we're doing this, we begin to see the butter pieces in the dough, and that's good. We're going to put this in the refrigerator, and you let it sit there like overnight in order to get the whole dough. What happens is that the yeast will kind of let the dough rise, and the butter will stay nice and cold because we're going to flatten all those out to make this nice flaky pastry. Now here's a dough that I made yesterday, and it's ready to be rolled out and folded, and you can see this is what it looks like. It didn't look a whole lot different than when I put it into the refrigerator, but the yeast in there is working. Okay, so now we're going to take it out, and it's quite stiff, and I want to spread some flour onto my workboard, the work surface, and we'll turn the dough out. See, there's a little bit that didn't get mixed in. And now I'll dust the whole thing with flour, and with my hands kind of pound it into kind of a squarish shape. It's kind of fun to do, actually. You can get little kids doing this to help you, because it really is a very easy way to make Danish pastry. So this is where we do the rolling and the folding to get the layers in the dough. You can see, if you look close up, there's pieces of butter in here, and the butter pieces are what we're going to be flattening out when we roll the dough. There are two different kinds of rolling pins. There are those that are the ball bearing rolling out type. I can use either one, but the French prefer this kind that's just without handles, and so either way I think it's fine. But if you happen to have one of these, use it. What's kind of nice is that it's kind of massages your hands as you're rolling out the dough. And if you find a sticky spot, it's okay simply to powder it with a little bit of flour. Okay. Turn this around. And I'm going to dust it lightly. And then we roll it out again. This dough handles very easily because it's cold. But there will be wet spots, and that's okay. And I see one right there. Okay, we roll it out. 2 as big a square as you can possibly make. Now in the recipe I've got inches and everything all designated, but that's because editors always want to know how big do you roll it. Okay, I'm going to get this controlled. You can see already, you can see where the butter pieces are in there. So we'll fold it over on itself. And this is different from the regular puff pastry method, because we're rolling the dough in. You fold it into like a business letter. And this is a little bit sticky on the bottom. We'll fold it again. And this has a few little places where it likes to stick, but that's okay. You just use your flour sprinkler, and then we'll roll it out again. And we'll roll it and fold it as many times as you have the time and energy to do. And it is at least 4 times. That way we're developing the flakiness. Okay, now again, I'm going to fold it over like a business letter, and it's beginning to be very controllable. And a scraper like this is really essential. If you don't have one, go and find one because they are there's lots and lots of uses for a bench scraper is what it's called. And every time we do this rolling and folding, you're flattening out those butter pieces so that we end up with a flaky pastry. If at any point when you're doing this, the dough gets so sticky you can't handle it, then just put it in the refrigerator and let it chill out and take it out again and continue to your rolling and folding. Actually, the more you roll and fold the dough, the better the pastry is going to be. As long as you can still continue to see these little flattened pieces of butter in there. And at this point, we can wrap it up and put it in the refrigerator for the final rolling. See what a neat little pile of dough that is compared to the way it looked when I first took it out? And this will go now into the refrigerator. And you can keep this for up to 4 days before you roll it out. Although you can actually put this into the freezer and let it thaw out later, and you have it out already when you want to make some pastry. And the Great Scandinavian Baking Book is one that I did a lot of research in the Scandinavian countries to write, because that was my first book was that way too. In the Finnish cookbook, all of the inspiration, everything that I have in there, it came from the old country. And I did the same with the Scandinavian Baking Book. And we went up into the northern part of Sweden and then down the length of Norway. That was great fun. And then into Denmark. And in Denmark we discovered that I was looking for the traditional foods, traditional foods of the area. Found that the traditional foods were not served in the fancy restaurants, but rather in the inns and the byways, and not in the evening so much as at noon. So I'd get these very traditional foods from Denmark and Norway and Sweden. We'd eat them at noon. In the evening, we just kind of, we didn't really have big meals. So that was kind of a huge discovery. Well, now for the fillings. And I have like one basic method for several different fillings, and it just depends on what you can get on, what you have on hand. I am going to make an apricot filling, a prune filling, and then I have an almond filling that I've already got done. So we take 1 cup of prunes, if I can get them out of here, pitted prunes of course, and a cup of sugar. That goes over the top. And I need a cup of water. The cup of water goes right over. Now when you're making the apricot filling, it's exactly the same thing. I use dried apricots, a cup of dried apricots, a cup of sugar, and a cup of water. And then we're going to put that into the microwave, stir it up and put it in the microwave. And this takes about 10 minutes. High power for 10 minutes. Our prunes are cooked, and this is what they look like. We'll close that. And we're going to put these into the food processor and puree the prunes to make the prune filling. And that looks good. But this is the consistency we're looking for. And you can make apricot filling in exactly the same manner. Just put the apricots, water, and sugar into the microwave for 10 minutes, and you've got your filling. My almond filling, I just softened almond paste that I got in the grocery store, and just softened it and put that, just mixed it up with some butter and an egg white, and I think that needs a little bit more liquid, so we're going to add a little liquid to that. But we want it just to be like almost like soft butter, so we can spread it into the pastry. So this was in the refrigerator overnight. Actually, it was only in the refrigerator for a couple of hours. And again, I'm going to dust my work surface with flour so that it doesn't stick. And I'll dust a little bit of flour on top of the pastry. And you can see how lovely the little pieces of butter look in there. And we're going to pound it out to get it started. It knows, when I pound it out, it'll know that I'm going to try and roll it out. So that will get the pastry loosened up. And then we're going to roll this out till about 1/4 of an inch. And keep it as square as possible. We're going to roll this out to approximately 16-inch or 18-inch square. That happens a lot when you're working with a yeast dough. You roll it out so far, and then it won't go any further. And the reason it won't go any further is that it needs to relax. So we need to let the dough relax. The James Beard Award was really basically for the collective work that I had done, but they stamped the Scandinavian baking book with the James Beard Award. So you see that on the cover of every one of the books. You fly to New York, and you go to I forget the name of the big center where this was. There were thousands of people there, and I was really not sure how I should dress, what I should wear. I put on a pair of high heels and then discovered that I had to go up and get the award. I had to climb up 3 or 4 stairs. And I thought, oh my gosh, when you're nervous, it's really hard to walk on high heels. and I hadn't done much of that because my feet are so big, they never really made high heel shoes big enough for me. It was a great affair. I was totally honored, and it was all kind of a big blur at the end. And I'm going to do a couple of different things. One is going to be the braid, the Danish braid. That's really kind of fun to do. And then I'll show you a few other shapes that we want to point out. Okay, let's take the dough and cut it into a 6-inch, roughly 6-inch strip. This little corner here is likes to be a little bit on the wet side. Okay. Now, we will shape this into a braid, believe it or not. We're going to spread the first some almond filling right down the middle. Spread some apricot filling in the middle. I like the combination of apricot and almond. It makes a good flavor. Now, what we're going to do is make cuts right down the side of this one. And I have to try and be about equal on both sides, but sometimes that doesn't work out. All right, then we start with the top and we fold it over like so. Fold it first one side, then the other. Oops. See, I got a little bit uneven there. But you almost don't ever notice it. You get it nice and straight, and we'll put it on the cookie sheet. And it has to rise for a few minutes until it's about doubled. Now let's do a couple of other shapes. And I'll just make like one of each. For instance, these are our favorite prune filling that we like at Christmas time. Christmas stars. We just put a little bit of prune filling in here. Maybe a little bit of the apricot. I mean, the almond filling would taste good too with the prune star. And then to make the star, you pick up one corner. Always use the same corner. And there we have the star. You can make them as big as you want or as small as you want. Now another thing we can do is fill a square with apricot filling, and again I'm going to go with the good old almond filling. And that is one that we often see. Well, let's make that into bear claw. And the bear claw shape is made like this. And we pick it up and spread it out. So how's that? Then there are other shapes that are popular. One that is kind of fun, it's called the packet, and it's shaped like that with the filling on the inside. See, the Danes are really smart because they use the same dough in many different fillings, and it seems to taste different when it's in a different shape. Okay, this one is called the Spandauer. So we put the filling. Now this would be really good with raspberry filling, and they go just from the in toward the center. These will rise for maybe half an hour, and they go into a 350-degree oven for approximately 20 minutes. Well, our Danish pastries have risen. They might not look like they've risen very much, but they have risen. I'm going to brush them with a little bit of egg wash and then sprinkle them with some pearl sugar, and they'll go into the oven. You can tell that this one has risen a little bit longer than the other one, but we're just going to touch it. We don't want to varnish it with egg wash, but we want to just touch it up so that we have some shiny spots. And then on the other one too. And our Spandauer's looking good, and our packet's looking good, and our stars are looking good. Then we'll sprinkle them with a little bit of the Swedish pearl sugar, which always makes it look a little bit festive. Okay, now we go into the oven. 375 for approximately, and I've got the convection oven on so I can put both pans in at the same time. This will take about 15 minutes. Here they are, baked and out of the oven. Well, you can see the flakiness of the dough right there. Pick this up, it's still hot. But the dough is flaky. You can see how it pulls apart. It's all that rolling and folding that makes the difference. And that's what we want. I love it. See you next time when we'll be preparing delicious soups paired with perfect breads. I'm Bea Ojakangas. Welcome to my kitchen.
Funding for Bea Ojakangas' Welcome to My Kitchen is provided by the citizens of Minnesota through the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.